Good afternoon. If you are in New York City or Connecticut or somewhere in the Eastern time zone of North America or South America, right now in New York, we are having a storm that Verdi or Rossini or Wagner would admire and try to compose. So if you hear a boom, boom, boom outside, it's not Verdi, it's Mother Nature. Good evening to those of you listening to Europe and Africa. Special love as always, greetings and strength to our loved ones in Ukraine, and hello to people all around the world. It is Friday. This is Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. Adagio is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to fans all around the world. I have a wonderful guest today. I've never met her. I've heard her numerous times with great pleasure. You have too, especially if you love the opera Die Zauberflöte, the Magic Flute. You definitely have heard Katie Lewek, who is a coloratura soprano who joins me from her home in Connecticut. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me, Fred.
Great to see you. I want to start with a definition, if we can. You are par excellence a coloratura soprano. Define coloratura.
Good question. Because I really think of coloratura soprano as being you can have two different types of coloratura soprano. You have the lyric coloratura and you have a dramatic coloratura. Now, a lyric coloratura is kind of a lighter voice. And definitely kind of the thing that you share with both of those types of coloratura is that really sort of very high and fast singing, extreme extension. And the thing that differentiates them is that the lyric coloratura is a little bit of a lighter voice and the dramatic coloratura is a little heftier. It's more like your sort of bigger lyric voice, but also has that extension. And we sing, I'm a dramatic coloratura, so I sing Queen of the Night and Violetta and Lucia. Of course, I like to sing a lot of different things, but one of my favorite things is to try to keep my flexibility as a singer, but definitely a little more on the heft with the voice.
So people assume because the word sounds Italian that it's an Italian word, and coloratura is an Italian word, but actually the derivation comes from German, coloratur, and the Italians just added the vowel at the end. But it's a German vocal definition. I always find that interesting because people assume that bel canto and all of its permutations, everything is Italian, but in this case, we know from study that is a German origin word. And it brings me right to one of my favorite roles in all of opera. She Has a Tough Time. It's a role you've sung, Constanza. I always call her Costanza, but Constanza in Mozart's Die Entführung aus dem Seraglio, the abduction from the Seraglio. My father, who really knew his music, loved that opera. He just felt that musically it was everything, and Mozart wrote it early in his career, I believe 1780 or 81, and it's a spectacular piece of music, the whole opera, with maybe one of the hardest opera arias for soprano for anyone, Martin aller Arten.
I was going to say, you must be talking about Martin aller Arten.
Yeah, which right up there with Großmächtige Prinzessin from Ariadne of Naxos and Lucia di Lammermoor's Mad Scene and a lot of the Mad Scenes. But this one really was one of the first that's very long, very high. It expresses all kinds of emotions. The first person I ever heard sing it live was Joan Sutherland. And I've heard Edita Gruberova sing it numerous times, and Catherine Malfitano wonderfully, and more recently Lisetta Rapeza in Paris. And it's a killer, or am I mistaken? Is it not a killer?
Gosh, I feel like if you're really going to call it a killer, then maybe it's not for your voice. Yes, it's like super challenging. Okay. But as with so many coloratura roles, you just can't sing them unless your technique is really, really solid. It's just not possible. You can't just gut your way through Constanza. You can't gut your way through Queen of the Night. It's just not going to come out if you, so-called, we kind of call it gutting through. And so, yeah, I would say it is an extreme challenge, but a killer, no. I think I can't call it that.
Okay, good. I'm glad. So I guess this brings up the issue of technique and who your teachers are. And you studied at Eastman School of Music, which for people outside the US, you may not know it. It's one of our great conservatories. It's in Rochester, New York. Robert McIver was your teacher. Then you had the great pleasure of going to California and studying at the Music Academy of the West with Marilyn Horne, who coloratura par excellence. We should specify coloratura is not only sopranos, because
Correct.
Marilyn Horne is coloratura. Samuel Ramey as a bass. It is possible. Rockwell Blake as a tenor are examples. And then you've been studying with Diana Soviero. Now, Christine Gerke famously says that Diana Soviero is one of the greatest teachers that she's ever come across and helped her immensely in her career. I've interviewed Marilyn Horne numerous times. We are friends. I've interviewed Diana Soviero, and that exists on the internet for people who want to see that, not with Adagio, but New York University. And they're all fabulous. They're all very strong in their opinions. But what is it that they impart or demand of you as a student?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think each of my major teachers that I've worked with have demanded something really different from me. Each of them. Doc McIver at Eastman really demanded protection. I was a really young singer. I started out really not knowing my voice well at all, which is not uncommon when you're 18 years old to not really understand what you're dealing with, because your voice really doesn't totally develop. I mean, in the business, we say you don't really get your equipment until you're in your mid to late 20s, depending on your Fach. Some of the bigger
Fach
voices.
being group of roles that are congenial to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, as you know, in some of the heavier Fachs, sometimes the equipment doesn't come in until your mid 30s. And even within that, your voice continues to change. I mean, with the birth of my two children, my voice changed what felt like drastically to me. But with my first teacher, Dr. McIver, he really just, it was about exploration. It was about, I went into my journey at Eastman thinking that I was a mezzo soprano. And I went into my first lesson and I said to him, okay, let's just get one thing straight. I don't sing high and I don't sing fast. And he said, yeah, we'll see about that. So, I mean, boy, was I wrong. Look at me now. So, it was really about exploration, and it was about protecting my instrument, because he always said that a young voice is like the soft spot on a baby's head. It's so easily damaged if you overdo things, if you demand too much of it too soon, which happens. I mean, voices are destroyed early on sometimes, and it's devastating. So safety and protection and the care of the voice was really what he demanded from me. And then, working with Marilyn Horne, and kind of at the same time, I was working with Deb Birnbaum as a vocal coach. And that was a really interesting time. It was post-college, but it was before my career really got started. And again, it was a lot about exploration. It was a lot about decision making, and because I think I do have a relatively flexible range and a flexible instrument. And so with Ms. Horne, quite a bit of my time with her was really kind of exploring different arias and repertoire. Because when I met her, she, I mean, it's just so funny, the way I was jumping around from Fach to Fach. I sang my audition for her. I sang Lucia. It was one of the first soprano arias that I learned. It was Regnava nel Silenzio from, it's her first aria.
Act one, yeah.
Yeah, and so I went in there and I sang that, and she asked me to cover the role of Mignon, which is a role that she sang early on in her career, and is really kind of a Zwischenfach, which is kind of a number of different voices can sing it. It's really kind of a high mezzo role.
Zwischen being in between, so between Fachs, yeah, high mezzo.
Yeah, and I ended up going on to sing that at Music Academy of the West on stage, because unfortunately the woman who was singing the role got laryngitis, and so I was out wine tasting in Santa Barbara County with my parents who were visiting, thinking that I was just going to go on the next day to sing in the chorus, and Ms. Horn called me and said, "Katie, I need you." So this, that's a lesson to young singers.
That was a very good imitation of Marilyn. The intonation was right. That was perfect, actually.
So, so I was singing Mignon, but a funny thing happened that summer. I was warming up in one of the practice rooms out there on the campus at Music Academy. And one of the vocal coaches happened to walk by the room that I was practicing in. And she heard what she would describe as a dramatic coloratura, or just any kind of coloratura. And she said, "We only have 2 coloraturas in this program, and that isn't either of them." But she heard this high extension. And so the next thing I knew, I didn't know this was happening, but apparently she had gone around and kind of like peeked in through a window to see who it was. And she saw me, and she reported back to Miss Horn. And at my next lesson, Miss Horn said, "Katie, you haven't been honest with me." And of course, my heart dropped. I've just disappointed Miss Horn. Oh my gosh! And it's like my life is over. And she told me what she had found out, and I said, "Well, yeah, I have these high notes, but I mean, nobody wants to hear those. They're really ugly. I'm like, this is it. I would never use them." And I said, "Doesn't everybody have these high notes?" And there's just like the coloraturas are the ones that people want to hear those notes. They're pretty, it sounds really nice. And she said, "No, not everybody has those notes."
You do such a good imitation. You have a great ear. It's spot on.
So that's kind of my big, that was my big discovery with Ms. Horn, was that she really, for so long, I was so, I just didn't know what I was. I mean, I really was lost as a young singer, and I have the rejection letters to prove it. I mean, things really, to me, felt like they were getting off to such a slow start. Really, because I felt like, I got lots of callbacks from all the major companies, all the young artist programs. So there was interest there, but then I think everybody just thought, we don't know what to do with this singer. We just, she doesn't know what to do either. So at that point, Ms. Horn really felt that I was a lyric coloratura. And I have to be honest, I think it's the only thing I ever disagreed with her about. I really felt like she helped me in so many ways with my confidence. I remember her saying to me, "I have no worries about you. I just, you're going to be fine."
You really could do stand-up. I
spent a lot of time with her. These infamous, in the singer circles, and we talk about lessons with Ms. Horn, they are, talk about tour de force. We were talking about long arias before, but Ms. Horn, she just will charge you like a flat rate for a lesson. and you go to her apartment and you go up there, and it just kind of depends on how much energy she has. She just schedules one lesson per day. She doesn't, do by hour or anything. Most of my lessons stretched until almost 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would just sing everything that I had, and she'd pick it apart and pick it apart and pick it apart. And it was extremely frustrating, but so helpful. From such a legend in the business, that you can trust.
She's kind, but she's also very direct and straightforward and no nonsense, which is what we want.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because she kind of changes from being this, like warm grandmotherly type person when you walk in the door, and then, okay, let's get to work, and then it's like all business, and it's scary sometimes. The intensity that she brings to her teaching is the same kind of intensity that she brought to the stage. And so it's a little alarming at times, but so helpful to have that extreme attention to detail, and knowing that nothing goes under her radar. It's really phenomenal. And likewise with Diana. Oh my gosh. I can't say enough about Diana. And with her, she demands perfection at all times. She, from the very beginning, when she heard me, she was such a believer of my talent, of what I could bring to, what I personally could bring. That, I think that's really what keeps me so glued to her. Well into my career, I still work with her when I can. And because she taught me so well, I very rarely get to see her because I'm booked so much.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just such a tremendous gift to work with someone who so truly believes in your instrument and in your artistry. And also so detailed because of her time singing in her career. That attention to detail is incredible.
So I think it's fair to say that you are most known, at least so far, for your performance of the Queen of the Night in Mozart's Die Zauberflöte, the Magic Flute. And I say it in both English and German because you have sung it often in both English and German. And that's part of what I want to talk to you about. I think you've done it more than 300 times. By my count, 44 at the Metropolitan Opera. I have probably seen 20 of those in English and German. I believe I saw you in Aix-en-Provence as well, in the production that's now coming to the Met. I believe May, and you're in that one as well. And no one owns a role permanently, but right now you are the owner in the world of the Queen of the Night. You're the go-to artist when people want the best Queen of the Night. Now, that's terrific. But on the other hand, do you feel trapped? Because it's such, I mean, you could make your living singing the Queen of the Night for the next 5 years and then go on to other things. I remember that Roberta Peters would sort of sigh and say, okay, I'll sing it again, but she really wants to do other things. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's funny because going back to something that Ms. Horn said to me, she told me from the very beginning, don't sing Queen of the Night. That was her advice to me. Don't sing Queen of the Night. And I'm not sure whether she thought that it wasn't going to be right for me, or if she thought it was going to be too right. Mm-hmm. But I was gonna interrupt you before and say, you started out by talking about how, so far in my career, that's what I'm known for. And I'm like, yes, can we just keep saying that it's just so far? Because I really, and really this season, actually, there's a lot of really exciting things coming up that are not Queen. But
Right.
from the very beginning, with my agent, Vanessa Uzan, she, again, talk about like, also like, it's so important for singers to surround yourself with a network of people that help you with your career, who truly believe in every facet of your career. The first thing that I sang for her when I was auditioning for her was Piangerò. It was a Handel aria.
Mhm.
And then I think the third thing I sang for her was Queen. I think I sang Regnava nel Silenzio after I sang Piangerò for her. And so she, from the very get-go, was like, yeah, this Queen thing is going to be huge, I think. And at that point, I was set to make my debut in the role at Deutsche Oper Berlin, in just a couple of months from then, when I auditioned for
So
Vanessa.
Deutsche Oper being West Berlin, right?
Yes.
Because I've seen you in the West. I'm not sure if I've seen you in the East. In other words, Unter den Linden. Did you do that production as well?
I have not. I was supposed to, but it was canceled
Okay, that's
for
what
the
I thought.
pandemic.
Okay. All right.
So hopefully, and I have not sung yet at the Komische Oper, although I've rehearsed there,
Yes.
because of the Orphée that the Offenbach that
Very costly was, yeah.
together. But that was for the Salzburg Festival, but we did a lot of rehearsals at the Komische Oper earlier in the season. But yes, the Unter den Linden, I hope is going to be rescheduled in the future, because that's on my bucket list of
Well, just about them, for people who don't know, this being where Daniel Barenboim is, they have a very famous historic production. And then they have a newer production. And 4 years ago or so, I was working in Berlin there and had the opportunity to see both productions in a week. And both times in German, of course, and Renee Papa was in both as Sarastro, or I think Sarastro in one and the speaker in the other, and good cast in both. And it's interesting to me that this company will not let go of what they consider one of their beloved productions, and other companies, including the Met, are criticized for letting go of certain classics like Zeffirelli's Tosca, which frankly, I was not sorry to see go, but I'm in the minority. And it's very interesting in Berlin, they're keeping the old flute, but occasionally bringing out a new one just for contrast.
Yeah, well, and I think a similar thing is happening at the Met right now. They're keeping the Tamor flute for Christmas time.
Julie Taymor.
And yeah. I'm bringing the McBurney at the end of the season, which I'll be a part of.
So Simon McBurney did it when I saw it in Aix-en-Provence in 2018. It's a very different production from the Julie Taymor. And it will be interesting to see both.
Yeah,
but let's
very,
specify now
very
that Julie Taymor will be in English,
yes,
and the Simon McBurney will be in German.
In German, yeah. I actually had a quick little conversation with Peter Gelb about the productions. He called my dressing room before one of the performances that I had this past season, singing flute. There's phones in the dressing rooms that are in-house phones. And he said, Katie, it's Peter. I just wanted to say toi 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 for tonight. And really looking forward to having you back next season for the new flute. And I said, yes, I've actually done it twice. And I really feel like you need to put a disclaimer out to the New York audience, because if people think that this is anything like the Tamor, because that's what they're used to, they are in for a big surprise. Like, do not bring your 10-year-old children to this one. But when people ask me about it, I mean, the McBurney is probably one of my favorite productions of Zauberflöte that I've done. And I think I've done something like 30 to 35 different productions of Zauberflöte or Magic Flute. And it really is one of my favorites. Because
why?
Because it's like a psychological thriller. It's like we're traveling into the darkest depths of Tamino's mind. His insecurities, his fears, his hopes, his dreams. And I Simon never explicitly said that to me about the production, but that's really how I see it. And it's quirky, and it really is a vehicle for the singing, which I love, because sometimes productions can get so sort of puppet-like, or so grandiose with the costumes or the fairy tale aspects of things, that you forget that it's an opera and you almost think that it's Cirque du Soleil or something.
True. In my memory, and I could be wrong, there was a lot more black, white, and gray in that production and less dazzling color than one sees in the Met Chagall and endless Magic Flute and Zauber Flöte productions that are, David Hockney did one that was very full of color. And the fact that the color palette was not so complex in this production and the Simon McBurney one made me focus again on the story.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Which is so weird.
Yeah. The story.
Yes.
Tell us why. I think of the Queen of the Night a bit as a role that you're probably not going to sing in your career, as Azucena in Trovatore, because she's anguish. She wants revenge. It's mother bloodlust in a way. It's resentment on what has befallen her. When I teach this opera, which I do very often, people are dazzled by the fact that the Queen has some of the most fantastic music ever written. And Sarastro can seem like a bore with his very deep music, but he's the good guy and you're the bad guy. And the fact that it's a woman who is, wants to bring on the vengeance of hell, basically, is scary. It's terrific. I don't object to that, but on the other hand, we see her hand her daughter a knife to go kill Sarastro and do all kinds of dastardly things, and yet you're the one, along with Papageno, that we love the most. And I feel sorry for Pamina, Tamino, and Sarastro, because they're the good people, but they're not. I mean, Papageno's good, but he's stupid. Whereas the others have a certain moral structure. And the Queen is not stupid, but she's hell-bent on everything that she wants to see accomplished. But her music is just, some of the most glorious music ever written by any composer for anyone. And the role is relatively short compared to certain other roles in the opera.
12 minutes.
Yeah, 12 minutes. That's it. And yet, if we don't have a good Queen of the Night, you say, well, okay, it was a nice evening at the opera.
Right.
It rests largely on your shoulders, even though everyone else has a bigger role.
Yeah. And that's, it's a unique role for a singer like me, someone with my kind of voice. It's a magical role in that way. I call it my passport role, because as a young singer, there was no way that I could have made it into the major, especially the European houses that I sang at so early on in my career in the last, 10 years, without a role that is structured that way. It is so in the minds of people, the starring role of the opera. And yet, yeah, if she doesn't do well, it doesn't ruin the evening, but it certainly makes a big impact.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like I'm so fortunate that companies always want to cast the Queen of the Night first when they decide to do a flute. It's like immediately, okay, we got to get if we're going to do a magic flute, we've got to get our Queen of the Night in the books. And so for years, I had 3 or 4 years out ahead of me. I knew I had however many queens I had, and then I could fill in and do other things. And that was the thing with my agent from early on, that she knew that I wanted to do other things. She knows that I'm a multifaceted kind of performer. And so it was always it was filling in those blanks in between my queens. And so it's interesting. I feel like I've almost been leading like a double career. because on the one hand, I'm singing queens at all the biggest houses in the world. And then on the other hand, at the smaller houses or regional companies, I'm singing like my leading dream roles.
Mhm.
And finally, I feel like this coming season, things are starting, these two careers that I've been having have started to join. I'm doing exciting things at Chicago Lyric and Deutsche Oper. And of course, in past seasons, the Salzburg Festival has been amazing to me. And the two opportunities that I had there, singing with Cecilia Bartoli in the Ariodante, which was just the most fantastic performing experience that I've ever had.
You were Ginevra.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was just life changing to be part of that production, and not just because of Cecilia, although I mean she made it an amazing experience to sing alongside her and to really co-star with her in that. And that's an amazing thing about a star like Cecilia, is that there's room on stage for other people.
Mm-hmm.
She makes room for other people. She makes room for other people to shine, which is incredible.
So if I may, before we go to a role specifically that I want to talk to you about, I want to stick with flute for a couple of more moments. Namely, you have sung it in English and you've sung it in German. It is one of those operas that kids are taken to, and there are many kid productions, in other words, for children. I, as a child who was interested in opera and music, was in productions of the Magic Flute as Papageno, which was really casting against type, because I don't like birds. And I would try to avoid the birds. But because you do this as a child, the lyrics are still imprinted in my head in English, so much so that when I go to a performance in German and I hear the baritone in German singing, I, in my head, repeat the English lyrics that I learned. So you do this production at the Met and maybe elsewhere, which has a translation by the wonderful Sandy McClatchy, J.D. McClatchy from Connecticut, who was a friend of mine. He died much too soon. And that's the version the Met uses. But it's a shortened version. It's a one-act version, although I imagine your 12 minutes are all there.
Not quite. There is a very clever cut in the first act aria.
Okay. But just the fact that the way English forms in the mouth in the same music, as opposed to German, in which it was written with the schickenator libretto, how is the experience different?
Yeah, I mean, every time that I unlike many American singers who sing Magic Flute, any of the roles in Magic Flute, I learned it first in German because my debut was in Berlin. So it always, to me, feels like coming home when I sing it in German, and it just so naturally comes out of me, and it's so ingrained. But of course, it's fun. I mean, I think I've sung like seven or eight now different translations of it. And some of them are better than others. And certainly the one at the Met it also feels very natural to me now, because I've been singing it since 2013. So nearly 10 years of singing the same English translation almost every season at Christmas time is it obviously feels really natural to me too.
You have become kind of like the Rockettes at Radio City, the New York attraction at Christmas time. We go to Radio City, we go to the Met to see Katie Lewek as the Queen. And then,
well, that's kind of fun. I like that.
So let me talk to you now about roles. I don't know, because we had a pandemic, we still do, whether you actually have sung these roles or whether you're preparing them. But one of the greatest and most complicated operas is Offenbach's Les Contes d'Hoffmann, The Tales of Hoffmann, in which there are four roles for a woman. Let's not call them soprano roles. And it's I always think of kind of like the opera La Traviata by Verdi, that there are four different scenes, and in each of those scenes, Violetta has a different voice.
Different singer. Yeah.
But that's compressed into 3 hours, and she's the same character. Whereas in Les Contes d'Hoffmann, you have Stella, Olympia, and then depending on the order, Giulietta and Antonia.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when I started out working in this opera, and it was done at the Met in a wonderful Otto Schenk production, it was Placido Domingo and Catherine Malfitano, and later Carol Vaness and Tatiana Troyanos, and all kinds of wonderful artists. We did Antonia's second. The acts were done that it was, well, Stella shows up, but then the first act is Olympia, the doll,
yes,
coloratura. The second act was Antonia, the lyric, and the third act was Giulietta, the mezzo.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm getting that wrong. No, I'm
Did you
getting
have
it right. And nowadays,
Giulietta in the middle, or okay?
Nowadays, because at the beginning of the opera, forgive me for, there's an expert on this opera named Michael Kay, who has devoted his life to knowing only this, not only, but he knows this opera better than anyone else.
There's a lot to know about it.
There's a lot to know because Offenbach died before it was completed, and there are so many different versions. And so there's no definitive version. It's like Verdi's doing Carlo, except that Verdi didn't die. There just were different versions. But with this case, it was picked up after and reconstructed. But we can say that in broad terms, Olympia is a coloratura soprano, Antonia is a lyric soprano, Giulietta is a mezzo soprano, and Stella
is something. She's something
unto herself.
She's soprano-ish.
Soprano-ish, but she's unto herself.
Yes.
And
sometimes she doesn't even sing.
Sometimes she doesn't sing, and then there's the fact that E.T.A. Hoffmann, on whom this was based, was inspired by Mozart, and in a way, these three women are like the three women in Mozart's Don Giovanni, and you could look back to that as a template. It's an opera that has both heightened reality and literalness, and many performers play multiple roles. There are four villains, there are four servants. Hoffmann is always Hoffmann, but he doesn't see because he doesn't want to see. A lot of times the reality, he lives in his own dreams. He has a muse who is sometimes a woman and sometimes a man. It's very confusing, but it is a fantastic opera. It's one of the great operas.
The music is so gorgeous.
Pardon me?
The music is so gorgeous.
The music is gorgeous, and what we care about in that opera is, I care about almost all the characters. Mm-hmm. My favorite of the women is Antonia, but I think that, so I'm going to say, I'm just putting this out there to you, and I can help you if you need it. By far the greatest Antonia I've ever seen is Catherine Malfitano, by far. And if you want to talk to her about it, I can help you do that, because
that would be awesome.
It's, when I think of the great interpretations of any role, in my memory, there would be Leonie Rieseneck in a lot of things, and Marilyn Horne in a lot of things, and Joan Sutherland, Lucia, people like that, where even though I've seen many and I've loved them all, if you've seen the Sutherland Lucia, that becomes the point of comparison. And Catherine Malfitano, frankly, for Antonia, I've never seen bettered. And it's such a beautiful role, and I came to understand the role through Catherine's performance. And that's what made me care so much about Antonia among all opera characters, not just in Les Contes d'Hoffmann. So you talk about the process of working on these four roles with their very different vocal requirements and dramatic requirements. Go ahead.
Yeah, you said it. There's just so much meat there. In preparing them, I really have treated them like they are four different roles. And I've worked on them separately. You know, in other words, in a practice session, if I'm going to work on multiple things, I would almost more likely go from working on Antonia to then maybe working on the Countess from Contorie, or Lucia, or something else that I'm working on, instead of working on two of the Hoffman roles at the same time, because it's important to me personally to make them as diverse sounding as possible. I said it kind of at the very beginning of our interview that something that I have held on to from the beginning of my time as a singer is flexibility and variation. And I think that kind of keeps it fresh for me. Even within the realm of Queen of the Night, there are some productions that I really sing her so much lighter than other times where it really becomes a very dramatic vehicle. But in terms of this, where with the Hoffman heroines, they are very often sung by four different singers in a show. And so, and people are kind of always looking for a singer who can do all of them. You know, it's like, are you a singer who can do all of them? And I've had people murmuring that to me for many years. And I've been kind of looking for an opportunity for when I could do it. And my opportunity actually came in 2018 to sing all of them. But I became pregnant with my daughter, and I had to cancel the production, which was also going to be at Deutsche Oper. It was the premiere of the production that I will now go and do this season in December. So I'm super, super glad that it's come around again and that I get to go and do it. Although this time, you know, we don't get 6 weeks of rehearsal. It's like 5 days or something. And the fact that it's the first time that I'm doing it, I feel a little bit like I'll be in over my head, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, they are so different, and I really like to keep them separated, just for the sake of really trying to make sure that all of them are very, very different.
You know, in Berlin, whether the order will be Olympia, Antonia. Julieta? That's
Yes.
the order. Okay.
Yep.
Because it does all kinds of things for us as audience members, the narrative, if it's one order or the other. Because to me, I always saw Antonia as his last hope of as Hoffman's last hope of reality, of meeting someone who actually is a real and compelling person. But the way it's done nowadays usually is that Olympia is a doll. He falls in love with a doll who sings spectacularly well, but he's so blind, he puts on these glasses, that he doesn't accept the reality that the woman he's fallen in love with is not even a woman. Yeah. Then Giulietta, being a courtesan, as the term is in Venice, sees him as, you know, a one-night stand, a bit of work. And then Antonia, who lives in Munich, is actually a really
true love. Yeah.
True love. If you do her last, then it's very tragic. Whereas if you do her second, he goes from a doll to a real person. But then when that doesn't work out, unfortunately, then he goes to a prostitute in Venice because he's demoralized and he doesn't think he'll ever meet someone like Antonia again. So to me, that setup of the character of Hoffman is a very different trajectory.
Yeah.
And where I
what do you prefer?
Pardon me?
What do you prefer?
I prefer Antonia's second.
Yeah.
Because then you could understand his descent, because he's so bereft at the fact that she has died. Because she's the only one who dies of the three. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the doll becomes dismembered, but she's a doll. And Giulietta goes on to her next customer.
Right.
And Stella is the person who is surrounding this whole thing that causes Hoffman to drink and then tell these tales so wonderfully. So I ask my guests who join me I often ask them to pick recordings from the Adagio catalog that inspire you. And I'm going to name the four, but we're going to talk about one or maybe two. The Rachmaninoff Sonata for Cello and Piano in G minor in Opus 19, because it's your favorite piece of music. That's good. Chopin's Fantasy Impromptu in C sharp minor, recorded in 1984 by Vladimir Ashkenazy. You began as a pianist, and you were in labor when this piece was on. Is that correct?
Yeah. So um, this piece of music is like, it follows me. My grandmother, who was also a pianist and an opera singer, she used to play this, and my mother asked me to learn it when I was in high school, when I was still a pianist, and so I worked on it, and I never was very good at it because it's extremely difficult. But my mom used to tell me this story about how she thought that it sounded like buzzing bees, and that she'd ask my grandmother to play the Bumblebee song, and she would just kind of zoom around the living room and underneath the piano and everything. And I can just imagine my mom as a little girl doing this. And it's just a fantastic piece, and that the middle section is just so heartbreakingly gorgeous. And so I was at the hospital to have my second child a year ago, and I had a lot of complications with my first birth with my daughter almost 4 years ago. And so my OBGYN had recommended that we do a scheduled C-section. And it was also not without complication, but that's a different story. But I went in, and so I never actually went into labor with my son. But my anesthesiologist, as he was giving me the spinal, he said, "Well, is there any music you'd like to listen to? I always like to make it a nice atmosphere while this is happening, and as the surgery is happening, the C-section." And I said, sort of haphazardly, I just said, "Well, I like to listen to classical piano. It's just kind of puts me in the zone." And I said, "So anything classical piano." So he put on, I don't know, some sort of like Spotify playlist or something. I don't know. And I don't remember what was playing in the first 20 minutes of them preparing me and starting the surgery. But literally, as my doctor said, "Okay, he's about to come out," this song came on. And I looked at my husband and I said, "Did you tell him to play this?" And he said, "No." And just the tears started with both of us. And then as my son Charlie was coming out of my body, this middle section of the Fantasy Impromptu comes on, like the beginning of this piece is so, it's just, it's like frantic. And then the middle section is the most peaceful thing you will ever hear, and just so gorgeous. I couldn't stop weeping. It just was so special. I felt like it was a message from my grandmother, just safety and watching over us. So it was.
Well, you had a better experience than I did, because in 1988, when I had some orthopedic surgery and they put me to sleep, they asked what I wanted, and I chose a Montreuil Caballé album, basically, and that was great. But apparently the doctors didn't like it. So once I was out, they put on something else. And when I awakened when they were concluding the surgery, but not in the recovery room, but still in the operating room, they were playing something like, the worst punk music. And forgive me for what I'm about to say, but I yelled at my doctor, "Turn that shit off." Was my first words.
Like, that's not what I ordered.
Music people, they're not easily satisfied.
Man. Yeah.
But the two albums I want to talk to you about are most specifically Les Contes d'Hoffmann with Edita Gruberova as the four heroines in Placido Domingo. Domingo was a very, very, very famous and wonderful Hoffman. Yes. I worked on the production he was in here at the Met many, many years ago, and wonderful at it. And Gruberova, who died a year or so ago, I think, was for many the paragon of coloratura singing.
Yeah.
So talk about that, please.
Yeah, well, so I think, I mean, two things really. There are some singers that you identify vocally with, and some that you just don't. Like, you listen to how they sing and you think, I just don't know what that would even feel like. And when Edita sings, that's how I feel. I think, I don't know how she feels. It's like, I feel like we have nothing in common vocally, the way that we produce our sounds and stuff. But so when I first was listening to it, I was like, oh, I don't know. Cause I never really study one recording when I'm learning roles. I listen to everything I can find once, so that I just kind of get this really broad scope of how it can be done. And then I just try to bring myself to it. But I find I literally have never listened so much to something when I'm learning it. And I need to, I'm like a little addicted to it, and I need to stop, because, or else I'm just going to sing it like Edita did. And I want to sing it the way I would sing it. Mm-hmm. But I'm just addicted to her Antonia. The way that she sings it. And again, it's interesting because she identifies as a coloratura soprano, sorry. And as do I, for the most part, although I feel like I've recently kind of entered into a new phase of my vocal journey, where, of course, I still have the range and I still have the high notes and everything, but I really feel like the thing that is more important to me these days is the depth of the character, and really what that lends to the depth of the voice. And listening to her Antonia is so enlightening to me, because it made me realize that a coloratura soprano it made me realize I don't need to pretend to be anything other than what I am in order to sing all of these roles. So in other words, Olympia at this point in my career feels a little out of place to me. It feels too light. It feels like a challenge to keep it simple. So that's the challenge with that. I think these days, I think the greatest Olympia singing out there right now is my friend Erin Morley. Mm-hmm. And it's just so like perfect and simple, but not boring. It's so spot on. And we're just, we're both coloratura sopranos, but we're like on the opposite ends of the spectrum as far as coloratura sopranos go. And I just feel like that's so her wheelhouse. And so it's a challenge for me to try to make Olympia sound the way that it needs to, with where my voice is going lately. And likewise, I was feeling like with Antonia, I was feeling a little out of place, like, oh, maybe I don't have a big enough voice to do this, or especially with Giulietta as well. And yet hearing...
And Giulietta's often done on her back.
Yeah.
Which is a different challenge.
Olympia is up in the air. So, I mean, it's, you never know what anybody's going to ask you to do. So I think it made me realize that, listening to Gruberova singing all of these roles, and she brings something different to each of the roles. They all sound like different people, but at the same time, it's all her. Mm-hmm. So it just really has made me learn that I don't have to be, I am absolutely enough for all of these roles. And it brings me so much joy to be able to do the thing that I always wanted to do, which is to be flexible and to have different sets of colors for things, and to be able to do it all in one evening. Not only is going to be a tremendous challenge, but just, I think it's going to be super fun.
I want to ask you a question that actually relates also to Erin Morley and to Placido Domingo and to certain other singers, but not all singers. When you start out as a really good pianist and have the piano really at hand and can study a score and can play anything from a score, how do you as a singer develop your roles and come to understand them? Domingo has told me, and I've seen him many times, work at the piano to work through a role, and he doesn't listen to recordings particularly. He just builds his own character in the piano and in his head. And I know that Erin Morley is a spectacular pianist and
It's phenomenal.
finds her way into her music, her vocal music, also through the piano. Talk about that gift and that perspective.
Yeah, I think that it's a tremendous help. I mean, I know that at Eastman, they actually make all the singers take quite a few years of piano courses to become proficient in piano, which was not something that I ended up having to do there. So it was kind of nice because it gave me a little extra time to do other things. It's incredibly demanding degree there. It's a lot. So I was thankful that I passed out of those courses. But I think that it is so important to at least have proficiency in piano because, I mean, to put it really simply, as a singer, when you're learning notes, there are no buttons to push. You know, unless you are just, sorry, my dog's in here. Hi.
Let's see the dog.
Come here.
What's your dog's name?
This is Chewbacca.
Chewbacca.
When her hair is longer, she looks a lot like Chewbacca.
From Star Wars?
Yes, so we named her Chewbacca and we call her Becca. But yeah, she just turned 2.
Beautiful.
So she's our middle child.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, she's the greatest dog. She is what anybody in our family needs. She's like she's a chameleon. She's a playmate to my daughter. She's super gentle with my son, who's 1. You know, he can like yank on her, and so can my daughter. They roughhouse, and she just is the most tolerant dog ever, and has so much energy, puppy energy, you know. Mm-hmm. And then in the evening when my husband and I are relaxing, she turns into a golden retriever. She's just the calmest, most like sweet and affectionate dog. So yeah, she's the greatest. We don't get to take her with us on our very long.
Well, let me ask you, I don't talk to singers much about their personal lives unless they bring it up, and I'm not going to get very personal, but if memory serves, when I saw you as the Queen in Aix-en-Provence, you were pregnant? Is that possible? Yeah. What's it like to sing pregnant? I saw Anna Netrebko at 8 months in Juliet in Paris, and that's a very demanding role. And a pregnant Juliet raises all kinds of questions anyway. But in your case, you were the Queen of the Night. She's a mother. It's okay. Mm-hmm. But I mean, physically, I mean, sound production.
Now, my question for you, though, before I answer that, is did you know that I was pregnant when I was singing the role, or did you just notice during the curtain call?
I don't recall. I don't want to give a wrong answer because I really don't recall. I was aware of it, but I don't know at what point.
I had so many people come up to me afterwards and say that they didn't realize, because she's in a wheelchair, she's hunched over, the costume is very forgiving. And then I'm kind of like hunched over my belly the entire time. And I was 7.5 months pregnant when you saw me. But I remember during my curtain calls when I would come out, and that's the first time that I'm like standing upright and I'm walking profile to go out for my curtain call and then turn to the audience. But when I would enter the stage for my curtain call, I heard audible gasps from people, like surprise that, oh my God, what, how did we miss that? You know? Yeah, so singing pregnant. Yeah. It's a wild trip. It's a wild trip. I think especially for Queen, because it's so athletic, and it's the time in between the arias was the craziest, because I felt like, especially near the end of my pregnancy, and I sang it until I was about 8 months pregnant, because I actually went on, after I finished that production in X, I went on to the Parlada Festival in northern Spain, and sang it until I was 8 months pregnant. And I would like warm up to sing the first aria, and then I would be exhausted. So I'd go back to my dressing room and I'd just kind of like sit there and pant and drink water and have a snack and be quiet and try to bring my heart rate back down. And then by the end there, she's like flipping around inside, you know, because she's figuring out which way she's coming out, and she ended up not coming out the right way. But I felt like I had to like re-warm up before the second aria each of those performances, because it's like the transfer of weight in a different, you know, like her legs are over here and head's over here and everything. And then she'd flip, and it was like the pressure was all different on my diaphragm and on my abdominal muscles. So I felt like I was like dealing with a different voice for each of the arias. But other than that, it was just a major challenge. The breath support, especially near the end, you just become so breathless, and you become, there's just no room. And I mean,
and you were seated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at one point, there was one point during one of my performances during the second aria with the wheelchair that I kind of like, I stood up for this. There was one moment where she kind of stands up, and it's like, oh, so much full of effort, which I didn't have to pretend about that. And she kind of flashes the knife at Pamina. And I had this twinge, and I thought, oh my God, she's coming, you know? And I was like, I got to get through the aria. And then if I'm headed, maybe I won't be back for the last ensemble, you know? And then it didn't end up, it was just like some sort of muscular thing. Which thank God, because, you know, I was only 7.5 months at that point. Yeah, no, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but at least there are breaks.
What do you sing to your children?
Gosh, you know, I sing a lot of Lucia to them. I mostly hum. Both my husband and I mostly hum to them at night if we're in the middle of the night rocking them to sleep, which we're pretty much after, like, we're kind of done with that stage with them. They're both really great sleepers anyway. But yeah, there's a lot of you know, we actually like sang out. I feel like it would be a little scary.
Lullabies?
So there's a lullaby to the same tune as Mozart, you know, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, that my mom rewrote the words so that it's a now I lay me down to sleep kind of lullaby.
You know, Marilyn Horne many years ago brought out an album of lullabies, and she with her director said, so how was it? What do you think of it? And I said, well, I never got through it. I fell asleep by the fourth track.
My favorite thing that she did, my favorite thing for kids that she did was that C is for cookie. The C is for cookie thing on Sesame Street, I just cannot get over it. But she's sitting there, C is for cookie, that's good enough for me. I mean, it's just the dedication, really. Everything.
So your other pick that is a brilliant recording is what's known as the Lisbon Traviata. What it is actually is Maria Callas singing Violetta live in Lisbon in 1958 with a very young, super talented tenor, Alfredo Kraus, who to me is a paragon of just about everything. And there he was singing with the great Callas in one of her best performances of Violetta. Why this recording? I know that your teacher, Diana Soviero, was a fantastic Violetta who I saw do it. Why this recording?
Oh my gosh, why not this recording?
Mm-hmm.
It's just the greatest.
Many that you would pick.
Yeah. I guess this recording because so my husband, Zach Borchewski, he's a tenor. And he's sung Alfredo more than any other role in his career. He's sung it, I think, 40 to 45 times, I think, at this point. And this is what he wanted to listen to when,
well, yeah.
you know, I mean, also with Alfredo and with Krauss, it's just the interesting thing to me about Callas, who I do feel like when I listen to her sing, I can feel it in my throat. You know, she's one of those very different than Edita Gruberova. With her, I don't feel it. You know, it's amazing to listen to, but I don't feel it in my throat. But with Callas, it's like I feel every little micro movement.
But is it a good thing to feel it or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is. What's interesting to me about her is that, I mean, she's just one of the greatest singers that's ever lived. And yet it was rarely perfect, technique-wise. And she didn't care, you know?
You think she didn't care? I think she was a perfectionist, so I think she would care.
Yeah, I mean, maybe she did, although it seemed like she put so much more importance in the dramatic side of the character rather than, oh, this has to be like a technically polished performance at all times, you know? And so the dramatic side of it is always perfect. It's always connected. Something that I say to my students is, I don't want to see the technique on your face. That's not why people go to the opera. People don't go to the opera to hear a voice lesson or a masterclass, you know, they go to be moved. And that's what was the most important thing to her. That was the most important thing to Diana as well during her career. And it is the most important thing to me. Now, of course, like I've spent years honing my technique so that it's second nature, so that it's not something that I have to obsess about while I'm singing. But when I get out there on the stage, absolutely the most important thing to me is the dramatic integrity of the character. And if I'm not connected to that character every moment, then the performance is not going to move anybody. You know, it's not going to make sense. It's just going to be a whole bunch of silly people up on a stage opening their mouths.
Yeah, that's politics.
That too.
You want to keep opera better than politics.
Yeah, for sure.
Katie Lewek, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Taught me a lot. And
I've learned so much from you.
Oh, well. But I encourage listeners to, if you're in Berlin, absolutely to go for these Hoffmans. And whatever else you have on your program, I imagine you have a website. Would it be Kathryn? Spell it out.
KathrynLewek.com.
Okay. And you have on that your upcoming performances, your engagements?
Yeah, I leave tomorrow for Vienna. I'm singing some Queen at the Staatsoper. And
excuse me.
Yeah. And I'm going without my family because I'm only there for 2 weeks. So it's going to be a nice little recharge. And I'm going to be studying my butt off because I have the Countess Adele and Cantori coming up with Larry Brownlee at Chicago Lyric in November.
Wonderful.
And in December, I have the Hoffmans, and then I go straight on to make my debut at Royal Opera House for singing Queen once again.
Okay.
And then I head to Nice, France for a Lucia.
Good.
And I finish off my season at the Met with the new production of Magic Flute. Oh, and one other thing, there's not a whole lot of information out about it yet, but in October, I think maybe we've settled on a date in October. My husband and I actually recorded a few months ago, a fundraising concert for, at the time it felt very immediate to make it for Ukraine, but now we are really trying to broaden the scope for the charity, which is for the UN food program, because of everything that's happened in Ukraine. Of course, the global food crisis has really spiraled out of control. Yeah. And in addition, we've had this drought all over the world. So with those factors, we felt like it was really important to kind of broaden our scope for the charity to just be for the UN food program.
And how can people find that? Yeah.
So definitely watch my social media platforms to find out more about that. There will be lots more information being dropped about that in coming weeks. But I think that you can expect to see that available for streaming at the beginning of October.
So here's a little anecdote. North of you in Massachusetts is the wonderful American-based John Cheek, who was my guest a couple of years ago. And he's a spectacular cook in addition to being a great singer. And he likes to post on social media what he's cooked. And he, the other day, posted a beautiful picture of black sea bass. And I read it wrong, because also he made a capital S. And I said, "You were able to get a fish from the Black Sea during a war?" Wow, all the way to Massachusetts. But you are right about the issues of Hungary. I don't know if you know about me. I'm the author of many cookbooks.
Yes, I was reading that.
So, but people think that I'm, quote, foodie. I'm really not. I believe in equitable, clean, available food for everyone. And that's much more important than fetishizing on some fancy ingredient that only 100 people can afford. It's much more important that we all have clean, safe food that will build our environment and build our children. And I'm very happy to hear that you're doing this, and I thank you for that. So keep up the good work. Toi, 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 as we say in opera.
Yes.
And I will hear you, I guess, as a German-speaking queen next May in New York for the Met's Die Zauberflöte.
Yeah, and that will, during that run, I will sing my 50th performance of Queen at the Met.
Fantastic. Very good. So that makes you the reigning queen, as opposed to the raging queen.
They had to tell me that I had broken the record. I didn't even know.
Fantastic.
I mean, I think the previous record was like 37 performances of Queen at the Met. And yeah, you said 44, although I actually think it's 43 because I had to cancel one in 2018 because I had strep throat.
According to the Met website, it's 44, but
okay. Yeah, they could be right. I don't know. Yeah, I'm a one day at a time gal these days. With
one queen at a time. Kathryn Lewek, thank you so much, and keep up the good work.